I don't know that we'll have anything major come up on the floor this week. I can't say that we won't. But I know in committee, some of the big issues will be having hearings for final passage. Property taxes, we assume that the assessment and appeals reform will come out of committee this week. After last week's meeting, we found some concerns of the committee members, and we've worked on those concerns, and I think we have everything ironed out. Again, to my knowledge, anybody that's read the bill or been involved in the process, counties, cities, schools, has no problem with it. So we think we're actually going to pass something very strong that everybody can be in favor of. Of course, knock on wood. Of course, today the legislation dealing with lawful carry will be heard in committee, and I know there's been enormous amounts of work that has gone into that legislation. It's not going to be everything that everybody wants, but I do think it is a significant step in the right direction as far as clarifying public gathering law, where you can carry, where you can't carry, and helping really all Georgians that have licenses plus law enforcement know who can carry and who can't carry and where they can carry. We'll have the budget, the amended budget. We worked on that all weekend. Yes, I was here on Saturday all day working on that. And that will be coming out of the Senate this week. Not a lot of changes with what the House has done, a few minor changes, but and so we'll probably end up going to conference, but not a lot of major changes. Some other bills of interest that have come out of committee or will be coming out of committee, the Medigap insurance legislation out of the insurance committee. I spent this morning at a dialysis center in Woodstock talking to some patients there, and I know that's extremely important to them. 29 other states have done this, where you offer the Medigap insurance to all people that are receiving, that are covered by Medicare. We think that's a wonderful thing. It really helps these people. I was talking to a lady. She said she spends $570 a month just on her co-pays for her drugs, and for her to be able to afford it, to get this insurance will really be helpful. A constitutional amendment that I actually introduced last year that passed out of committee last week, should be on the floor hopefully this week, deals with multi-year leases. As you know, the state, for the most part, is restricted to only being able to rent property and buildings on a year-by-year basis. Allowing the state to enter into multi-year leases, especially this time, could be significant savings. Steve Stansel suggests he could save up to $10 million a year by being able to enter into multi-year leases. And then the constitutional amendments that have been offered both by Senator Judson Hill and Senator Seth Hart, dealing with protecting Georgians' right to choose their own doctor, to choose their own health care, to not be forced into being part of a federal program, or I guess more importantly a state program at some point in the future that they don't want to be a part of. I suspect that will be on the floor at some point very soon. Both of those measures, those resolutions have passed out of the committees. And I think that's about it.
What kind of changes are you contemplating on the property tax? I missed the committee meeting. Are we still having year-round assessments?
Year-round assessments.
Appeals?
Yeah. Well, two major things are going to make sure everyone receives the notice of assessment so they have the right to appeal. That's maybe the biggest part of the legislation, because it guarantees every property owner's right to appeal every year. The current system clearly doesn't do that. In fact, only a small percentage of people have the right to appeal. And then the second part that was contemplated was the year-round appeals. While I still think that's a good public policy and something that can work, it may take a little more work to make that work. What I had contemplated and what was put in the original language was that you could file any time you want, but after a certain cutoff date, any appeal that resulted in a change in value will be reflected on the next year's tax bill. So for accounting purposes, the local governments would be able to determine that, all right, from this point forward, we can set our digest here, and from this point forward, it'll be reflected in the next year. I hope we'll someday go to that. What we've decided to do instead is, instead of having the year-round appeals, is to put on the notice of assessment that everyone will now receive every year your estimated tax. In other words, taking what your assessed value is and using the most recent millage rate, determining what your estimated tax is. Because I think for most Georgians, when they think about appealing, that occurs when they see their tax bill and they say, wow, this is how much I owe. I don't think I really owe this. By putting that estimated tax on the assessment notice, people can see that, what they're probably going to pay in taxes, and begin the appeal process then. So we think that will, for the most part, fix that problem. But again, I counted up the other day, and we're above 60 changes to the current system. So there'll be 60 statutory changes at least. And I don't know of any that are controversial. I mean, every one that we've seen so far is really just an improvement on the current system. Remember that people that have been involved with this are cities, counties, schools, taxpayer, attorneys, tax groups, and of course myself. So we think we've got a pretty good piece of legislation.
This, where do you stand on this point of sale, uncollected tax issue? Because Democrats are saying that the local governments and the Department of Revenue have to share both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And Department of Revenue is saying, you know, you give us the information and we'll take care of it.
Right.
Where do you see this heading?
Well, one thing to be real clear about is there's been some confusion over the last year or so is the difference between point of sale and local collection of taxes. Point of sale is just simply information that is obtained at the register for everyone's use. And I think we should have point of sale. Everyone should be in favor of point of sale. And that helps you in a lot of different ways. I mean, it allows the local governments to know where sales taxes are being collected. Right now, they don't know. And I'll give you a great example of why this is so important. You know, we had the Tour de Georgia. And you had all these communities who invested in the Tour de Georgia, but that they really didn't know if there was an economic benefit to them investing in Tour de Georgia because they didn't know if their sales were increasing during the time that the tour came through their particular city. Having point of sale information allows them to know, you know, we collected this much more sales tax during that time period, and that's important. Having locals collect the sales tax is a different scenario, and I think that's one that, you know, I had a study committee that looked into that. We understand what was going on in Alabama, and we talked to the company doing it, but upon further review, we found that there are some serious problems in Alabama with that program. I remember speaking to someone in Alabama that from the chamber over there, and they said that the problem they have is that complying with this in Alabama, the paperwork that is necessary, because now they're reporting not just to the state but all these other entities, takes them 6 to 10 times longer than it does in Georgia, and we certainly cannot afford to put that burden onto our retailers. So I agree, there's got to be two-way sharing of information between local and state. That absolutely has to happen. These local taxes were passed by local voters because of the local referendum for local purposes. The local governments ought to have a right to have that information. So we've got to force that to happen. And I think in the pilot program that has worked, it's worked relatively well. So I would rather us build it around that instead of following an Alabama model that clearly has some problems.